Hey there, deep diver. Ever heard of a barangay captain buying a speedboat from his own sister?
Hmm. Sounds a bit fishy.
Yeah, right. We're talking Barangay Dulao, a small community in the mountainous province of Ifugao.
Mountainous province, a speedboat. I'm intrigued.
Seems simple enough, right? But as you'll see, things aren't always as they appear. This case is about more than just a questionable purchase. It shines a light on the complexities of local governance, procurement regulations, and legal interpretations. So let's unpack this case. It all starts with Roy Hunnob, the barangay captain. He received a grant to buy a 25-horsepower speedboat motor for the community.
Sounds pretty standard so far. What's the catch?
Well, instead of buying a new motor, he purchased a used one from his sister, Caroline Hunnob, for P67,200.
Hold on, from his sister. That's where things start to get a little murky. What kind of motor was it?
It was a used Evinrude.
A used one, and he went to his sister. Why not a regular supplier?
And get this, he kept all this information secret from other barangay officials.
Secret. Now, why would he do that?
Well, it definitely seems like he was trying to avoid scrutiny. Maybe he knew that buying from his sister would raise some red flags, right?
Exactly. Purchasing from a family member immediately raises questions about transparency and potential favoritism. And it gets even worse. He also skipped all the essential steps like competitive bidding and documentation.
So no paper trail, no transparency. Sounds pretty shady.
You got it. And the barangay treasurer, Salvador Galeon, even signed off on the payment without any proper procedures being followed.
Oh, wow. So they were basically cutting corners and playing fast and loose with public funds.
You could say that. And remember, the Philippines has laws in place to prevent this kind of shady dealing. RA 9184, the Government Procurement Reform Act.
All right, RA 9184.
It specifically forbids awarding contracts to relatives of officials.
So what happened when the authorities caught wind of this?
Well, the Commission on Audit, or COA, stepped in, and they disallowed the purchase, meaning Caroline had to return the money.
Ouch, that's got to sting.
Yeah, and not only that, both Hunnob and Galeon were slapped with criminal charges.
Wow, criminal charges. So what were they charged with exactly?
They were charged with violating Section 3E of RA 3019.
RA 3019.
The Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. This section focuses on public officials who cause undue injury or give unwarranted benefits through their actions.
Okay, so like a referee penalizing a player for breaking the rules of the game.
Exactly.
And in this case, Hunnob and Galeon broke the rules of good governance.
Yeah.
So what happened next? Did they just accept the charges?
Not quite. They appealed the lower court's decision, claiming they acted in good faith.
Good faith. What was their reasoning there?
They argued that Caroline was the only supplier available, and their sole intention was to get that speedboat for their barangay. They just wanted to help their community and weren't trying to break any rules.
It sounds like a bit of a stretch, but I guess that's what lawyers are for, right? So what was the outcome of the appeal?
Well, that's where things take an interesting turn. They appealed to the wrong court.
The wrong court. How is that even possible?
Happens more often than you'd think. They appealed to the Court of Appeals. But in cases involving violations of RA 3019 by public officials, the proper court is the Sandiganbayan.
Two different courts. I'm starting to see why this whole situation is so complex. Can you break down the difference?
Sure. The Sandiganbayan is a special court. It specifically handles cases of graft and corruption by public officials. The Court of Appeals has a broader jurisdiction and handles appeals from decisions of lower courts on a variety of matters.
So appealing to the Court of Appeals was a major misstep, like showing up at a tennis match with a golf club.
Yeah, something like that. And because of this mistake, their appeal didn't actually get a proper hearing.
So what happened then? Did the case just disappear?
Not exactly. The Supreme Court eventually stepped in and voided the Court of Appeals rulings.
The Supreme Court. For a case about a barangay speedboat.
Seems surprising, I know. But this case brought up a significant legal issue, jurisdiction. And the Supreme Court, in their decision, made it clear that the Court of Appeals had overstepped its bounds. The Supreme Court's decision is officially known as GR No. 248639.
GR No. 248639.
Dated October 14th, 2019.
Got it. So the Supreme Court basically said, hold up, wrong court, and sent the case back down.
Precisely. The case was sent back down to be rerouted to the Sandiganbayan. where it should have gone in the first place.
So after all that back and forth, where does the case stand now?
Well, that's a great question, and it leads us to another interesting layer of this case. The Supreme Court's decision didn't actually address whether Hunnob and Galeon are ultimately guilty or innocent.
Wait, really? I thought the Supreme Court was the final word.
They are, but in this instance, they were primarily concerned with correcting a procedural error. Think of it like a referee calling a timeout to fix a play, not to decide the final score.
Okay, I get it. So it's not over yet.
No, not quite. The case will be retried in the Sandiganbayan, and that court will ultimately decide the question of guilt or innocence.
So the saga continues. But even though the Supreme Court didn't make a final ruling on guilt or innocence, their decision still speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It highlights the importance of understanding legal jurisdiction, even at the barangay level.
Wow. This case is already more complicated than I imagined. And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, we have a lot more to uncover.
Welcome back, deep divers. Before the break, we were talking about how the Supreme Court had to step in and redirect this barangay speedboat case because it landed in the wrong court.
Yeah, what a twist.
Right. But beyond the procedural drama, there's some really important legal principles at play here that are worth exploring.
Absolutely. This case isn't just about a speedboat. It's a crash course in good governance, legal processes, and the importance of understanding jurisdiction.
Exactly. So where do we start unpacking all of this?
Let's revisit the concept of jurisdiction, which we touched on earlier. The Supreme Court was crystal clear in stating that the Sandiganbayan has exclusive appellate jurisdiction over violations of RA 3019.
The Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act.
Right, especially when the accused are public officials.
Like our barangay captain and treasurer.
Exactly.
Okay, so appealing to the Court of Appeals instead of the Sandiganbayan was a major misstep.
Oh, yeah.
That ultimately delayed the resolution of this case.
For sure.
It's like accidentally boarding a plane headed for Cebu when you actually booked a ticket to Boracay.
Perfect analogy. And this little detour highlights the importance of having legal counsel who truly understand the intricacies of the Philippine judicial system.
Yeah.
Navigating the legal landscape can be tricky, and having a knowledgeable guide can make all the difference.
It makes you think about those maps they used to give out at malls back in the day.
Oh, I remember those.
Remember the ones with all the, you are here arrows?
Yeah.
Imagine trying to find your way around a giant mall without a map.
You'd be wandering around for hours.
Really lost.
Completely lost.
So beyond jurisdiction, what other legal principles are relevant here?
Another important doctrine is the concept of good faith as a defense.
Right. Hunnob and Galeon claimed they acted in good faith when they bought the motor from Caroline.
They did.
They said she was the only supplier, and their only goal was to get that speedboat for the barangay.
Right.
It was all for the good of the community, or so they claimed.
Yeah, but remember, the Supreme Court's decision doesn't actually delve into whether their good faith defense holds water.
Okay.
That's something the Sandiganbayan will need to determine during the retrial.
So even if they genuinely believed they were doing the right thing, it doesn't automatically absolve them of responsibility.
Exactly.
It's like accidentally bumping into someone at the market.
Yeah.
You might apologize and say it was an accident, but you're still responsible for any damage you might have caused.
Precisely. Intent is important, but the court will also carefully examine the evidence and determine whether their actions, even if well-intentioned, were still a violation of the law.
It's fascinating how this seemingly simple case is layered with all these complex legal nuances.
And that's what makes it so intriguing.
Yeah.
It's a real-life lesson in how even small decisions can have major legal consequences.
Absolutely. It also shows that ignorance of the law is not a valid excuse.
Right.
Public officials are expected to be aware of the rules and regulations that govern their actions.
Think of it like driving a car.
Okay.
You can't just say, oops, I didn't know the speed limit was 60 if you get pulled over for speeding.
So speaking of rules and regulations, wasn't there something about procurement procedures that were violated in this case?
Yes, you're right. This case shines a spotlight on RA 9184, the Government Procurement Reform Act.
Right.
It's all about ensuring transparency and accountability in government purchases.
And in this case, Hunnob decided to skip those essential steps, like competitive bidding. He basically handed the contract to his sister without even exploring other options.
He did.
That's a huge red flag, right?
It is. It raises serious concerns about favoritism and conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
It's like choosing your best friend to be the referee in a championship game.
Right.
Even though there are plenty of qualified, impartial referees available.
So even in a small barangay setting, these procurement laws need to be followed strictly.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about big-ticket items or national projects. It applies to everything.
Absolutely. The law applies to all government entities,
Yeah.
no matter how big or small.
Or where they're located.
Right. Transparency and accountability should be the cornerstones of governance at every level.
This deep dive is really opening my eyes to how crucial these seemingly mundane rules and regulations are for good governance.
It's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes the details can feel overwhelming, but each one plays a vital role in maintaining a fair and just system.
Yeah, it really is fascinating.
And speaking of details, there's another element of this case we haven't explored yet, the role of the clerk of court
Okay.
and their responsibility for handling case records.
You're talking about how the clerk mistakenly sent the case to the Court of Appeals instead of the Sandiganbayan.
Precisely. And this seemingly minor error had a domino effect on the entire case. It delayed the proceedings
Yeah.
and ultimately required the Supreme Court to step in and set things right.
It's like that game of telephone we used to play as kids.
Oh, yeah.
One little mistake at the beginning of the chain can completely change the message by the end.
Exactly. It demonstrates how even the smallest procedural errors can ripple through the legal system
Wow.
and have significant consequences.
Right.
The clerk of court plays a crucial role in ensuring the smooth functioning of the justice system,
Yeah.
and any mistakes can cause delays and complications.
It makes you wonder how often these sorts of procedural errors happen.
Yeah.
Is it more common than we realize?
That's a great question, and one that might warrant further investigation. But for now, let's shift our focus back to the Supreme Court's decision.
Okay, so they voided the Court of Appeals rulings
Yes.
and sent the case back to the Sandiganbayan. What happens next?
The Sandiganbayan will now have to retry the case from scratch.
Oh, wow.
They'll examine all the evidence, hear arguments from both sides,
Okay.
and ultimately determine whether Hunnob and Galeon are guilty of violating Section 3E of RA 3019.
So it's like hitting the reset button on the entire case.
In a way, yes.
Wow.
While the original trial court found them guilty,
Uh-huh.
that decision is now void because it was appealed to the wrong court.
Right.
The Sandiganbayan will be starting fresh,
Okay.
but they can certainly consider the evidence and testimonies from the previous trial.
This case really underscores the importance of due process and making sure every legal step is handled correctly.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that the legal system, while designed to deliver justice, is also susceptible to human error and procedural complexities.
And sometimes those complexities can lead to some surprising twists and turns, like in this case.
It certainly does, but that's also what makes exploring these legal cases so fascinating.
For sure.
They offer a glimpse into the inner workings of the justice system.
Yeah.
And remind us that even seemingly simple situations can have far-reaching consequences.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Right.
There's always more to discover beneath the surface.
There really is. And that brings us to the end of part 2.
It does.
We'll be back in a moment for part 3, so stay tuned. Welcome back, deep divers. We've spent this episode wading through the twists and turns of this Barangay speedboat case.
It has been a wild ride.
It's fascinating how something that seems so straightforward on the surface can reveal so much about the complexities of our legal system
Yeah.
and the importance of transparency in local governance.
Really does highlight how seemingly small decisions can have ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate situation.
Exactly. This wasn't some massive infrastructure project or a shady deal involving millions of pesos. We're talking about a speedboat motor in a small barangay. But even at that scale, the implications are huge.
You've hit the nail on the head. This case serves as a microcosm of a much larger issue.
Right.
Whether it's a small purchase or a major development project, transparency is paramount. The public has a right to know how their money is being spent and to be assured that decisions are being made fairly and ethically, with the community's best interests at heart.
It really makes you wonder, if this kind of thing could happen in Barangay Dulao, What about other barangays across the country?
Yeah.
Are similar situations playing out under the radar, unnoticed and unchecked?
It's a valid question, and unfortunately, it's one we can't answer definitively.
Yeah.
But that's precisely why cases like this are so crucial. They bring these issues to light, spark conversations, and hopefully inspire change.
So what can everyday citizens like us do to promote transparency and accountability at the local level? It can feel overwhelming to know where to start.
Yeah, it can seem daunting,
Yeah.
but there are simple, practical steps we can all take. For starters, we can stay informed about what's happening in our own communities.
Okay.
Attending barangay assemblies, reading local news, asking questions about projects and expenditures.
Yeah,
These are all ways to engage actively with our local government.
that's a great point. Sometimes it feels like these things are happening in a vacuum, but we have a right to know what's going on and to hold our elected officials accountable.
Absolutely. And let's not underestimate the power of social media and citizen journalism. Sharing information, voicing concerns, and sparking dialogues online can help shine a light on potential irregularities and amplify calls for transparency.
Right. Because even though this case is centered on a barangay in Ifugao, it's a story that resonates nationwide. It's a reminder that the principles of transparency and accountability are crucial for good governance, from the smallest barangay to the highest office in the land.
Precisely. And while the legal system can sometimes feel like a labyrinth, with its complexities and procedural hurdles, it ultimately aims to uphold these fundamental principles.
This deep dive has really driven home the point that even seemingly minor cases can have major implications. It's not just about the speedboat. It's about fostering a culture of transparency, accountability, and ethical governance at every level.
Beautifully put. It's a reminder that we all have a stake in this, and we all have a role to play in ensuring that our government operates with integrity and in the best interests of the people it serves.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into this intriguing case. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we have.
It's been a fascinating journey, uncovering the layers of legal complexities and broader societal implications.
But before we sign off, we want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Imagine a Philippines where every barangay has a fully transparent and accountable system for managing public funds and implementing projects. What kind of impact could that have on our communities, our nation as a whole? What role can each of us play in making that vision a reality? Head over to the comment section and share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future episodes. We'll be back soon with another fascinating deep dive into the world around us. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.